Welcome to The Coffee Break, the daily Christian talk show from KCMI. Every weekday, we are joined by a musician, author, pastor, or other member of the community for an in-depth discussion about Christian topics and events. The Coffee Break airs live at 10 a.m. weekdays on Hope Radio KCMI 97.1 FM.
Well, good morning. You are listening to The Coffee Break. Great to have you joining us today. And if you have a song you'd like to hear, I'm going to ask you to hold that because we got some music we're going to be playing for you this morning. Have a special guest in the studio. We have Lauri Matisse. How you doing today?
Hi, Russ. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, so we met here just recently, and you are you have a shop here in town.
Yes, I have a gallery and gift shop called the Moo Gallery. So I've got
Moo.
The
Gallery.
Moo, yep.
M-O-O Gallery.
My mom used to own the Cat's Meow. Her name was Bunny Slater. So it was fitting that I opened the Moo Gallery.
All right. So you got to keep it in the creature realm there, huh?
Yes.
So you have the Cat's Meow and you got the Moo.
Right. And so it's my architect
well.
studio as well, but in the front is a little gallery and a gift shop and fun for kids to interact. And I have my children's books and things there, so it's really fun.
Yeah, so you are from the area here, right?
So I was born in Los Angeles, but we moved here in the late 60s.
Okay.
And because my dad was from around here, he was from Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
And after they lived the California dream for a little while, they decided he wanted to come back here. Mm-hmm. So he brought my mom. She was from the Lincoln area originally.
Okay. Yeah, so she was from Lincoln and your dad was from Gordon, and somehow they ended up in California.
Yeah, they met in Lincoln in college.
Okay.
And my dad had always wanted to have a Cadillac and drive, live the whole dream out there. He was born on a ranch. He grew up on a ranch in the Sandhills.
Had to see the world, right?
Yes, and he did. He worked for Bank of America. He met actually Walt Disney when he came in to ask for his loan to do Disneyland.
Yeah.
And so we were part of Disneyland when it started. We got to drive in the Cadillac convertible down to Disneyland, and it was really fun. So we loved it there. I loved it. We lived in Pasadena. Mm-hmm. My mom loved it. And then my dad moved her back here, and she's like, what am I going to do here?
This isn't California, right?
So she brought her everything she was doing in Pasadena back here, and that's how she ended up doing her shop.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can talk a little bit about that because, of course, then you kind of followed in that same vein of the
my
shop.
Mom,
and it's like,
yeah, she was an entrepreneur. She was an amazing woman. And this was, 68. She opened it, I think. The businessmen in town say, ha, 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 you're not going to last long, And I just picture her legally blonde going oh, you just stick around and see,
Right.
So she had 800 vendors. She ordered imports from all over the world. So she gave me she was wildly successful. So she gave me just that feeling I'm a woman and I'm an entrepreneur. I can do anything I want.
Right. So Mom did that and she was willing to put in the work, the effort that needed to be done. And so that's the beautiful thing about this country that we get to call home, right?
Yes.
Is that if you're willing to put in the effort there and trust the Lord to bless that effort there, you can accomplish a lot of things.
Yeah, it wasn't the California dream, but it was the American dream and the way that we have so much freedom, and there's so much freedom here in, Western Nebraska because there's not a lot of regulations. We can do a lot of things here. It's a great place to live.
Yeah, so you've been back here. You said, was it
3 years ago?
Okay.
I came back to help my elderly parents.
Okay. So you were out in California?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they came back before you did.
Yeah, actually, so I went there after college, and then they stayed here until they closed the Cat's Meow. Then they moved out there with me, so they were out in Santa Barbara area.
Okay.
Again, my mom's super happy out there, and then my sister stayed around here. She was in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. And then during COVID, I had made a move to Arkansas a few years before COVID, but then during COVID, my sister asked me if I could move over here and help. and I really wanted to be near them.
Yeah.
So I came back for that purpose, but they had already come back here. So they had been out there about 15 years after they closed the Cat's Meow. And then my dad was like, I want to die where I was born.
Take me home to Crawford.
So my mom
Gordon, right?
packs up from beautiful Santa Barbara area,
Uh-huh.
and she was like, okay, but it was a great decision because they were at the
Sure.
residency. They had all their friends here.
Right.
And my mom just loved the residency.
Yeah. You say Santa Barbara now. Do I have this right? Did Johnny Carson live out there in Santa Barbara?
Yeah, so he lived out there somewhere.
The Norfolk, Nebraska kid
Yeah,
that goes out to
yeah.
California.
And there was another famous Dick Cravett. I think Dick Cravett.
Okay.
He was kind of a famous comedian. He knew my mom growing up. They were friends in Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know if she knew Johnny. I did have a really, one of my best friends was Orson Bean, who's an old-time comedian.
Okay.
And he actually did the Johnny Carson show like 200 times.
Wow.
So I met him in Venice Beach. He and his wife,
Sure.
Allie, who is, she was the mom on the Wonder Years. So,
okay.
Yeah, they were some of my best friends in the church. I went to a little Lutheran church in Venice, and it was just so fun to be out there with, and believers too. Like these people were
Right.
strong believers and actors, and so
Well, and of course, Ronald Reagan was California.
yeah, he was up
So-
there.
so-
I think in a ranch up there by Santa Barbara somewhere. Yeah, beautiful country. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. So you got to really experience a lot of things out there and meet a lot of people that we hear about to maybe see. On
definitely.
different,
Like, for instance, like I got to buy a piano from Marty Goetz, who's like a famous Christian musician. He's a Messianic Jew. And I went to the church where Keith Green, was going. And then I met Frances Roberts, who wrote Come Away, My Beloved. She's an author, and I went to Ojai to meet her. Beautiful, beautiful soul. She's like, I said, do you have advice for me as a young author? And she's like, just keep Jesus first, just keep the love for Jesus first, and everything else will fall into place.
Yeah.
And then I happened to live in a house once that was built by Amy Semple McPherson. And she, of course, was an evangelist in the turn of the century, pretty famous. I just moved in this house, and this neighbor said, hey, that was built by Amy Semple McPherson. And I'm like, are you kidding? Because I loved her.
Sure, yeah.
So a lot of cool stuff like that.
And all of those different interactions, those people you got a chance to meet and interact with, they all leave their mark on your life, don't they? And you benefit from what were some of those things you benefited? You mentioned there about one of those about being an author and just keeping Jesus first. So what are some of those other things you look back on, those experiences, those interactions you had with people that really shaped what you've become and benefited you?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because I really went after it. I had a vision when I was a kid, like about 10 years old here up on the hill, up on 35th in the alfalfa field, that I was going to be a writer, and I was going to write about God, and I was going to touch thousands of people. And I was like, I didn't even know what a vision was, and I didn't even know what I saw, but I was just like, oh my God, my sister. I said, oh my God, Suze, I just saw like I'm going to be an author. And so I loved Ann Kimmel. I think her name's Ann Kimmel Anderson now. She's an author. She was
familiar.
very, very instrumental in my life as a young teenager because she wrote these books called Yes, and, I can do all these things. I can't remember all her stuff, but I reached out to her and, I would go after people who were doing stuff that I kind of wanted to do and would try to talk to them and get advice from them. And so I think that really helped me a lot because if you're a writer or an artist, musician, I call it it's like the hardest thing on the whole planet because you're like the most sensitive group. Artists are the most sensitive group when we have to stay sensitive to our art or we can't make art. But you're up against all these people like, oh, you're an artist now. Oh, you're a writer now. Oh, you want to do that now? And so you have to surround yourself with other people, like support group of other artists, other writers who are doing things you want to do. And I think that really helped me to to have support, especially when I got to LA, just people who were going after it as well, and also as a believer, not going the secular route. You know, there were people that really, influenced my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So all those different things you've done, like the author, because you felt the Lord was showing you you're going to be an author. So obviously you loved books.
No, I didn't really
You
love
didn't.
books. I'm not really a reader.
You're
really,
not.
No.
Now, that seems really a bit odd. Did you think that was odd?
Yeah,
that was
my
strange?
mother's always like, I'm a reader and you're a writer. I started writing poems when I was little, and they were all heavy poems, and I always wrote in a journal, so I wrote in a diary.
Yeah.
And then I became, wanted to be a playwright. So my dad's like, what's a playwright? And I'm like, I'm going to be writing plays in
Can't
New
you do
York.
something like banking or
I
something
know,
like that?
yeah,
It's
that's
like,
what he
what's this?
said. So then I ended up in I started out in theater art for about a year at Lincoln, and then I ended up in architecture because of my dad, because he's like, get a profession. And I'm like, I go, what's a profession? He goes, engineering, medical, accounting, or lawyer. I'm like, Dad.
Boring.
So,
is
but
what
I
Lori
literally
says.
saw a woman drawing plans, and I said, what are you doing? And she said, architecture. And I'm like, I'm doing that.
So you're drawing. I like to draw.
Yeah, I love
right?
to draw.
So that expressive
Yeah.
spirit there.
So,
yeah.
and I really am gifted as an architect, thank the Lord. I used to do display in the back of my mom's shop. My sister loved the front, but I like the back. So I like to build stuff and I made doll houses, and now I'm just doing that every day. But during the whole time I was always writing. I had to write my thoughts down. I had to write so writers write. Writers just write. We have to write. We can't not write. So I published my first book when I was about 25, and it was just because I have to write. I have something to say. I need to say it. That kind of thing. It's just in you.
And that's I still am just in awe that this wasn't something like you loved reading books. And so in a sense, it seems like it would have been easier if you were a lover of books and did a lot of reading. You'd kind of see how different writers go about expressing
Right.
and
in Hollywood, I wrote some movies. I got paid to write. I did some short films. So I did end up kind of doing the playwright thing. But yeah, and I just, my mom had a great vocabulary, so I always wished, because as a reader, I think you get a better vocabulary.
I've heard that. Yeah.
So I've always wished I could maybe expand on that.
So have you since then have you taken more into books? You'd mentioned some authors there. So have you taken
Well, yeah,
more
I
to,
did read
to
some
enjoying
books.
maybe even more books since that's
Yeah, I do read books. I tend to read a lot of. I like writers' diaries, for instance, like what their thoughts were when they were writing. And I have taken to several authors that I really like. Can't remember the name of one of them right now. It's called Elizabeth and Her German Garden, and she wrote these amazing novels. So there are, if I get really into an author, then I like them. But I don't like superficial, like my mom read romance novels, and she would read one a night. And that's just not me. I like to read something really interesting, more deep, or something like that.
So I'm thinking like the Diary of Anne Frank.
Yeah, I
it's
like those
so-
kind of books. Yeah. Yeah, someone where they're really expressing, And I seem to write in the first person. Now, I have written a novel. It's for 8 to 12-year-old girls, and that's the first in the series. And I started some other novels. And I like novel writing. And it's just like people say novelists, characters start coming in, and you're just going, where are you? You weren't even going to be in the story. I don't even know who you are. These things start writing themselves. But I tend to write in the first person, the books I've published, more of a journalistic style, I guess.
Sure. We have Lauri Matisse in the studio today from the Moo Gallery, and hearing about just some of those influences and different things in her life that she's experienced and people that she's met and how they've helped to influence all of that. And so the writing but there's also music that comes into play.
Yes.
So where does the music, this idea for music, come about?
Well, so I was really gifted with the arts. Like, I'm a musician, an artist, writer. It's
all that expressing.
Yeah, and it's
so
all
this is
expressing
different ways of
something.
expressing.
I did come to a point in my life. I was, kind of all over the place for a while, and then I came to a point in my life.
That's typical of these artsy people, right? They're just like here and
I
there.
had big visions and dreams when I was a kid. I mean, I wanted to change the world. I wanted to change the world. I wanted to. But there's this movie called City Slickers, which there's this funny guy, and it's like, you have to get down to one thing that you focus on. And he's that funny guy. But literally, I came down to John 3:16, and I was like, everything I'm going to do, even with my architecture, like, I'm going to try to be focused on that. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And so that really helped me with everything I did to, like, I want to express that to as many nations as I can in as many ways as I can, if any art form I can. Mm-hmm. So the music, we grew up here with Mr. Bacon in the high school.
Yes, yep.
I was in all the musicals. I learned piano at a young age, and then I taught myself guitar in my 20s. Then I got in the worship band in the first church I went to out in Venice Beach. I was in the worship band, and then I just, like, same thing. I had something to say, so let's write songs, So songs are really easy for me to write. I didn't know years ago you can make a lot of money on songs. I've had friends that made tons of money on songs.
Sure.
I never knew that, or I couldn't have time to focus on it, but songwriting is really easy for me, and I do singer-songwriting, and then I've done, like, I had a radio show where I did some songs on it, and then I started getting orders for CDs. So I had a radio show where it was like, I read a psalm, and then I did a dramatic reading, and then I'm like, I'll sing a song for you. And so I sang a song in the studio, and then I started getting orders for a CD that I didn't have.
Well, there you go. So that launched you into your music career.
Yeah.
Right,
so my worship leader friend, who had written songs and made a lot of money in the Christian, song industry, he's like, "Come to the studio. Let's get you some songs recorded." So he recorded 8 for me, which was really great of him. So I could fulfill the orders. But I was a single mom. I haven't had time. I didn't have time. So people would always go, "You have to focus when you have a lot of different talents." But you have to focus on one thing, But so my one thing, of course, was John 3:16. But I'm actually really a professional in each talent I have. A professional is when you have studied, you've put more than 10,000 hours or something or whatever. But I've studied art, I've studied, screenwriting, I've studied music.
Sounds like you spent all your time studying.
Yeah, I was.
Right?
I don't know. I'm just like a prolific. Like, I just have to like learn whatever that is, and
my oldest daughter was one. She loved school, studying and learning and stuff, and thought it'd be really neat to be a professional student, but you can't. You got to pay for that somehow.
Right. So. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I thought about it, I would. Well, actually, I was going to get my master's, but I was like, I didn't want to stay in school. I think I wanted to get out and be with people.
Okay.
And creatively, I've lived on my creative talents by the grace of God. But sometimes you really struggle if you're selling your art somewhere or doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as like the drawing art, so you've done drawings as well.
Yes.
Because that was a thing as well. So I'm wondering, have you had anything over at even the art
Center.
The Art Center here.
Yeah, so in 2017, I got to have one of my Life Works shows there. It was called The Mystic Earth, and during the year 2000 to 2001. So it was a solo show. I got the whole place, covered the walls with the big art. So that was really a lifetime thing. That probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't Scottsbluff, like being from here. So that was really great. So I took art after architecture school. I got married, and then I would take an art class a semester at the community college for like 12 years. So I would just learn sketching and then learn drawing and learn painting.
So it's kind of like, like a semester each year.
Right.
So it was a slower pace so you could still do other things that were occupying your time because you didn't have time just to dive in.
Right. Like I gave up my career for my ex-husband, and I had children. And so it was kind of something I could do while I was, serving everyone else. But it was really fulfilling. And I had art shows. I've been in some pretty major galleries and things in Los Angeles. So,
yeah.
And I love art, but I don't have time for it right now. So I produce art products from what I've done, and then I sell them in the gallery. And then I did teach art at the Art Center last year, and then I try to mentor and help kids and do workshops and stuff.
Sure.
So.
Wow. Great to have Lauri Matisse in the studio. Great to have you out there as well. And Lauri, you actually brought a CD in of some of those songs. And you said you had over the course of your songwriting, you've done roughly about 20 songs, right?
Yeah, I have about 20 songs I've written, and I did singer-songwriting with those. And then I actually wrote a musical from my book called Eve's Memoirs, and it's called Eve the Musical. And it's a 28-song opera, which I had an Italian composer help me arrange 20 of the songs. And so it's never been made as a musical, but we're all always hoping that it will be.
Well, there's Brad Roney over there at the Scottsbluff High School,
Right.
And then you got, I'm not sure who his counterpart would be over there in Gearing.
I think it's Andrea. I think her name's Andrea that does the music, over there.
Okay, well, there you go. So, and it seems to me like there's even, Andy Stobel, I think, is big over there in the Gearing School there in the music part. So, Andy.
Yeah, I mean, it would be so cool if it ever got made. I did a Kickstarter, if anyone knows that's a microfunding site for my book, Eve's Memoirs, so I could get a professional editor. So I raised $5,000 with that, but I was just going to do an iPhone thing of myself. Hey, I wrote this book, and I want to do a Kickstarter. And I met this writer, director, producer named Jim Lindsay, who's a believer. And he loved the first chapter of the book, and he's like, oh my gosh, I am going to help you get your Kickstarter going. So he brought his camera crew, and he did my Kickstarter video professionally, which was so amazing. And then while he was doing it, he's like, I see it, Eve, the musical. And I was like, oh my gosh, I see it too. So I totally just got inspired and wrote the ideas for all the songs. And then a friend of mine who's writes, she's award-winning playwright, and she does films, short films and stuff, and she's a rocket scientist. So she's like,
she is an actual.
She is. She's a rocket scientist.
Rocket science. Well, she is in the rocket science.
Her name's Diana Woody, and I said, would you mind coming on board and kind of as a consultant to keep this funny and light, because she's brilliant. Because I tend to get more heavy because it's about Eve. It's about Eve from the Garden of Eden,
right? And
then the animals and everything, and Adam, and they fall into the future, into New York City in the musical. So the animals come too, and it's a comedy.
Sure.
And it's hilarious. And then, so she's like, sure, I'll help you. So we were working on this, and we decided to make it like an opera, which is there's no talking. It's all singing. And so then I was like, I just need someone to record some songs, and so we could get it out there and see if anybody likes it. And people were like, well, if you do the voice, I can do the music. I don't have time for that. I really don't have time for that. So Diana, one of her films, she had worked with this brilliant Italian guy named Marco Rossetti. He's a composer. And he got really inspired by the idea. So he flew out from Italy, and he and I sat at a piano for 6 days. I told him all the lyrics, all the melodies, and he arranged just short little clips of 20 of the 28 songs so we could submit it to this big New York festival.
Yeah.
And we didn't do bad at the festival. We didn't win, but we did get a note that we were, a contender. So, and then I just haven't had time to do anything since then.
Okay.
So that's how that was. It was just the
Sure.
funnest thing ever, just having this, working with this Italian and the rocket scientist.
Lauri Matisse joining me in the studio, and I want to play this first song off of this CD that you gave me here. Okay, so this one is the one that let's see, it talks about our tears, how he holds our tears, right?
Yeah, it's called Tears, and it's about the Lord says that he holds our tears in a bottle. And do you know they're written in my book? And so I went through a lot of pain and suffering like any, anointed believer might go through. Had my fair share. And so this was really close to my heart, and also I share in people's suffering, like the weeping of people and all theirs. So this is really close to my heart about the Lord holding our tears in a bottle.
Well, let's hear that song here on the Coffee Break by Lauri Matisse. Back with Lauri after this song.
Don't be afraid.
Back with Lauri after this song. So that is music from Lauri Matisse, a song called Tears. And Lauri, now, do you have any of those CDs? If folks are like, hey, I kind of like that song, I'd like to take a listen to some other songs, or do you have any of those CDs?
Yeah, well, thanks, Russ. This CD has been kind of buried. I mean, I have put some online on my YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm. So now you have a YouTube channel. You're just like...
Oh yeah, I even have a podcast. I have all kinds of stuff.
Really?
But
oh my goodness!
You kind of have to you have to know me before I'll let you know the podcast info.
So
the
have to stop by the Mood Gallery
Yes.
and say, "Hey, Lauri, heard you on the radio. Want to get to know you so I can check out all this other stuff you're doing."
Email, reach out. And you can go to laurimatisse.com. I'm pretty easy to find, and the YouTube channel is Lauri Matisse.
Should spell that, by the way, but if folks aren't familiar with your spelling of your name.
Yeah, so it's Lauri, and then M as in Mary, A, and then T as in Tom, I, and then SSE.
Okay.
And if you come to my gallery as well, I have a painting on my patio. I have a cute little garden there, and it's the painting of the heart of God. So it's a painting that's 8 feet by 8 feet, and it's the heart of God that holds all the souls of the world, and the John 3:16 is pouring out of the heart in the 27 major languages. So, but the CD is a good point. I hope. So what I'd like to do is just revive that. I've lost some of the tracks, so I'd like to find the CD. It's in my storage somewhere. And then I'll get some made. And then,
sure.
they could be available.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, well, there you go. So check out all that stuff that you mentioned the podcast. So,
Yes.
So how long have you been a podcaster? How did you get involved in the podcasting world?
Well, so when I did my first book called No More Dark Days, I was interviewed on Sid Roth's It's Supernatural. Sid Roth is pretty big time now. He was just starting out then, and that was a TV show and a radio show. So
how many years ago was that?
That was in 2000.
Okay.
And they flew me out to their studio in Orlando at the time. And the TV interview is really awesome. It's on my YouTube channel. You can get to it on my evesmemoirs.com. That's EVES and then memoirs.com. But when we did the radio interview, I met a radio person who was hosting it, like yourself. And I said, I always had an idea for a radio show. And he said, I've got the time. So we recorded like these 12 shows. It was called The Breath of God.
Right.
And it went out then on TBN network to like 2 million listeners. And then it was broadcast from Greece on shortwave radio to the Middle East. And as far as Asia, because I did get letters from India, China. So I loved radio. I would just loved doing that whole thing. I was like, so I think that's kind of launched me into kind of that broader, outreach.
The podcasting. And...
Yeah. And then that was before, we had YouTube and that kind of thing. So when YouTube came out, I got on there and I actually had a girl. Well, I was part of a group called Prophet.tv. It was a group of prophetic people that had a heart for the world. And so we did shows on there. I think that's what really launched me into that, where, and we did professional, shows, and then he would make them into on his YouTube channel or whatever his networks were. And then he got I said, if you ever get greedy or you tell women to be quiet, I said, I'm not going to be on your show anymore. So he did both those things. And so his producer actually left and came with me. And she said, I want to produce your show. And you have the heart that I'm looking for, So we did that for a little while, like 2009. 2010, but that was before YouTube would suppress the hate speech. And I would get like 5,000 views on something, but the hatred and the horrible stuff that was said to me was so hard. And I had little kids, I was struggling. So I just kind of closed it down for a little while and just worked at my architecture and just take care of my kids, you know, and I was like, I'll I'll pick that back up in a while. So I think, and then as the things got more spread out, you could do YouTube, and then podcasts got more popular. Then there's Rumble.
Yeah, so you really were like, when you were doing podcasting, I don't know the timing of all of that, but you were really one of those early ones in the podcasting world.
Probably early, yeah. I think really the Prophet.tv, when we were doing that, nobody was doing that. And I was really happy that we were taking the messages to the people, and we got to actually talk to people without like the organizations kind of, controlling things, which I'm fine with organizations, but I really have a heart ever since I was a kid to reach every nation in the planet, every person. And so I love that venue where you could do that. And then YouTube started censoring. So I got really back on YouTube in about 2017. And the hate speech was totally suppressed by then, which made it a lot better to be on there. But now then YouTube started censoring. So
sure, everybody,
YouTube censors.
If you don't like what's out there, you just
yeah.
Unfriend them or censor them or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So I started a Rumble account, and Rumble has committed themselves to not censoring. They will not censor. And then my daughter was listening to a podcast, and then Tucker Carlson, I was listening to him, and he said if you do a podcast, you don't get censored much because it's hard for them to track the podcast. It's going out on, Spotify and Google, and it's going out of all these channels. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll do a podcast too. And it was just a learning curve. 2019, maybe I started it. Basically making all my videos into the podcast and then getting that out. And then now, and I don't advertise, and I don't want to advertise. I don't solicit followers. I even try to hide because I want people really seeking the Lord if they're really going to try to tune in. I don't want money. I don't want fame, and it's not my name. And so I put the podcast out, and I started getting I've got listeners from like 67 countries right now in about 46 states.
Sure.
And I don't have a lot of listeners like you can kind of see the volume. It's not like, but I can tell that it's resonating with the body of Christ because I'll have a few in Portugal and a few in Brazil and a few in Indonesia, and it's really interesting.
Yeah. Give us an idea, just a sampling of just some of those things that you'd like to cover on your podcast. What's some
So I
things
started out with, so I got really into the Hebrew roots of our faith in like 2000. I actually met somebody from Israel, and I just wept when they sang in Hebrew. They were a cantor in a synagogue, and I was like, I've got to learn Hebrew. So I went to University of Judaism, learned Hebrew for a couple of years, and then I started to like wake up with a lot of other believers about how the roots of our faith were so rich in Israel. And so that really, my first podcasts were like about those kind of things, like what's Hanukkah really, or a deeper understanding of the Passover.
Right, and how that all points to Christ.
Yeah.
The fulfillment of that. All that stuff in the Old Testament was a picture of the coming one, right? All those feasts that they had, and
like
talk
he is
about
our
the Passover,
feast. Yeah.
And the whole Sabbath thing, our rest, our Sabbath, Christ, our Sabbath rest.
Yeah.
We find our rest in Him. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." We find that rest in Christ Jesus, and it's all just points toward Him.
It all points to Him, and it just made my faith so much richer and deeper. Like the water, when you turn the water into wine in those pots, they were the pots of the law. They were the pots that they would wash their hands in.
The purifying.
Yes, So everything, and then even in Hebrew, and in Hebrew scholars can correct me if I'm wrong, But the give us this day our daily bread is really give us this day our daily Torah, our daily word. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Old Testament.
The Torah, yeah.
But give us this day our daily word, our daily bread of life is what it really means.
Because man does not live by bread alone, but by
Right.
every word
Yeah.
that proceeds out of the mouth of God. What Jesus quoted there in the temptation in the wilderness.
Yeah. And then things like the Feast of Sukkot, which is the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacles. It's called the Feast of Sukkot in Hebrew, but that's the Feast of the Latter Harvest. And Jesus celebrated that feast. He got up in the temple and he said, basically, I am the living water that pours out. If you believe in me, I'll pour out of your belly as well. And they do a whole water festival time during the Feast of Sukkot. And Jesus basically was saying, I'm that water. I'm that to them. And of course, most of them got mad at him.
Of course, yeah, and he's the feast of first fruits, and that day that on Resurrection Sunday was the day that the priest would go into the temple and wave the sheaf of the first fruits there in the temple, and that's the day that Jesus entered the heavenly tabernacle there.
Yeah.
He is that first fruits.
Yeah, like he fulfilled those feasts, the unleavened bread, and then the feast of Shavuot is the Pentecost. Shavuot just means the Feast of Weeks. Pentecost is the weeks. And that's the day that the first fruits of the church came in, and everyone got saved.
The church was born.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So we have several feasts that haven't been fulfilled yet. We have the Feast of Trumpets, which will probably be when he comes again, and he fulfills that with his sound of the trumpet. The Feast of Sukkot, I believe we're fulfilling that right now. That's where all the harvest of the souls are coming in on the planet. And there is worldwide revival going on. I don't know if everyone knows that, but I certainly...
We look at our country, we say we need revival.
I know,
right?
we need it. There's like 5 million people in the underground church in Iran.
Yeah. So
11,000 gathering in Indonesia to worship, whereas you could get like beheaded there 10 years ago.
It's amazing. We don't hear about that stuff in the news, so it's amazing what God is doing even in these days. And so
it is. It's so
God
for
is
someone
still at work.
Yeah, for someone like me who's just prayed and wanted world evangelism my whole life, it's so astounding. I'm really excited to see what's going on. But yes, we need more in America.
Sure. Yeah, so check out that podcast page there. So how often are you doing podcasting?
So I'll do it just as the Lord leads. It might be once a month. It might be, every couple months. So I moved from talking about the Feast of Israel into, I also have my books on there, but they can also listen to 2 of my Audible books on my YouTube channel for free. So I have the books on the podcast, some of them for free. And then I kind of moved into talking more about like our times that we might be living in and how they might pertain to like the coming of Christ. So
yeah, just trying to understand these times that we live in and how that all points to what we know is the culmination of all that we pray.
Right,
it's like thy kingdom come, right?
Yeah,
we long
hope.
for that. Yes.
Like Maranatha.
Yes.
When are you going to be here?
Sure.
So I was saved in the Jesus movement.
Back like with the Keith Greens and the Chuck Gerards and Randy Stonehill and those,
And they had a couple Jesus bands come through here. We moved here in the 67, so I was about 6 or 7. But when the mid-70s, some Jesus bands came through here that really affected my life. I was talking to one of your listeners about that. But really, my mom led me to know Jesus when I was about 3. Do you want to ask Jesus into your heart? And I was like,
what does that mean? And so, sure. Yeah. Yeah, got Lauri Matisse in the studio, and she's with the Moo Gallery. So folks, it's hard to miss your place if they're over there on 19th Street. Right, over off of 19th Street and Avenue and First Avenue.
Yeah,
right? So,
1 block east of Runza is what I like to say, and next to the Potter's Wheel.
Okay. So you're kind of around the corner there from the Potter's Wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see this nice you put your art on display there right outside your entry there. So describe what that looks like and how you decided upon some of that art.
Okay, yeah. So people couldn't find my studio. They're like, "Where are you?" And it was just a concrete block building, you know. And then they were like, "And what are you? What is it?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a gallery and gift shop, like in an architect's studio." And then I was like, "Okay, the gallery actually needs a name."
Mm-hmm.
So I started thinking about the cow's moo and the moo and everything, and so Moo Gallery. And then I had a couple teenagers working with me that were just so fun to work with, and we started getting funny ideas about the funny cows, and so it just started evolving. And if I would have evolved from the backwards to forwards, I would have just painted the whole building like cow print, but I had painted it dark blue. So we painted funny cows, and then people started going, "Oh, that's where you are."
Sure.
And then we got the back of the mural, back of the building done this year. It's really just the cover of one of my kids' books, and then we put this cow, "Fly Me to the Moo."
Mm-hmm.
So
fly you to the moo.
And then now in the front on the sidewalk, there's a piano.
Right.
And where kids can interact and play it with their feet, because that was just a customer, because we had a little crack in the sidewalk, and I was like, I can't afford to fix that whole sidewalk. So she's like, paint a piano. And I was like, great idea.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll last there when people come by and start scraping snow off and ice and all.
We'll probably have to
go out there and
repaint.
just each spring go out there and do some touch-ups. Huh?
Right.
So,
yeah.
So folks are invited to come on by and check out the Moo Gallery from the cat's meow your mom had.
Right.
You're at the cow's moo.
Right. The Moo Gallery. Yeah.
The Moo Gallery. So.
Well, I told my other friends, all over the place. I said I had to open the Moo Gallery. I'm in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
And so the official address, folks are like one of those, I'm going to write down the address of that. So what's the address of that?
So it's 110 East 19th Street in Scottsbluff.
Okay, 110 East 19th Street. You can check out the Moo Gallery. You're open there just...
we are open Wednesday through Friday, 12 to 4, and Saturdays, 10 to 4.
Okay.
And then the second Friday of each month, we're open in the evening for a special event, like on September 16th. I think it's the 16th. We'll have Don Osborne. He's going to be singing some old 70s tunes.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little patio, so I call it Music in the Garden. And we had one last Friday night called Gospel Night, so we had some gospel singers. And then you can always email me or call me, and I can come open the gallery. I live a few blocks away.
Okay. So they can find you out there in the World Wide Web, and you're on Facebook. You're on social media.
Yeah.
And do you have a website or anything like that?
Yeah. So I'm building the Moo Gallery website, but you can find the laurimatisse.com. You can find all the current events at the gallery.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go on Facebook. It's called the Moo Gallery and Lauri Matisse Studio.
Okay.
So the Moo Gallery on Facebook. You can find that pretty easy. Then the Moo Gallery you can find on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just building that, so I'd love more followers on that. And I also really just love to, support artistic people, and you'll find a lot of support at the gallery.
Mm-hmm. Spell your name again, so the folks want to do that search for you. They'll be able to find you easily.
Okay, it's Lauri, Lauri, and then Matisse, Matisse.com. And from there, you could email me. If you look up if you Google in the Moo Gallery, you can call me. If you reach out personally, I'll tell you what my podcast is.
Okay. All right.
And that would be great. And I'd love to meet any of you.
All right. Well, Lauri, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on in.
Thank you.
So look forward to maybe some future opportunities to visit too. As well.
Yes. Thank you so much, Russ. It's been a really fun and great time. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Coffee Break. New episodes are posted weekdays. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or almost anywhere you can find podcasts. You can also listen live from our studio in Scottsbluff, Nebraska at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on KCMI 97.1 FM. To find out more about KCMI programs, visit the podcast page on our website, kcmifm.com/podcasts. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/KCMIFM. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of The Coffee Break.